Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Steiner, a solutions architect here at Concurrency. I want to welcome you today to talking with us about the power of Fabric and Purview, kind of the leveraging the Microsoft tools for modern data governance. So through the course of the day today, we're going to tour Fabric, and then we're going to tour the relevant parts of Purview related to Fabric. And then we'll kind of talk about how those fit together and some of the things that we're talking to clients about, and clients have been working through in terms of how do we govern our data better. This highly relevant right now is we're exploring, you've long had this as you've been doing analytics projects, but particularly with the emergence of AI, this has been a hotter topic because you want to make sure that you're only surfacing things that people should be able to see when they're prompting AI and asking questions of it. And also ensuring that that's protected with any of the outputs that get generated from those AI tools. So yeah, with that, let's dive into
Joe, I'm going to just take a break for a second. Somebody's saying the meeting's not audible. Can other people hear okay? I'm having no issue hearing on my end. If anybody else could chat in the chat box, I'm not having any issue. Yeah, everybody else is okay, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to check. I appreciate it. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, are we good now?
It looks like nobody else is having issues, so maybe just a matter of their issues.
Got
their
it.
settings.
Fair enough.
So,
Fair enough. No, yep. So diving in then, we'll continue on with Fabric. So Fabric is a lot of different pieces that have existed. Some of these have existed for some time. Some of these are newer. But what Microsoft has done with Fabric is brought all these together in a more user-friendly way in a lot of ways. One of the things I do want to state up front, though, is as they're bringing these things together, sometimes we've had some clients say, well, I used to be able to do this with what was in Azure, but now this is a little limited. That's continuing to grow. It's not really limited in what can be done. It's just sometimes we still have to use some of the external tools on that too. So for anybody that's worked with Fabric, there are ways around anything. So anything within the Microsoft Azure framework can be leveraged here. But the thing that's really fascinating about Fabric is they're making this easier and easier for people to do that maybe didn't have the deep technical backgrounds, but do understand what they want out of the data a little more. And so it's really been a fascinating development there and democratizing what was the data science, data engineering plane. Not entirely getting away from needing to have those kind of skill sets, but making it simpler for people to get things done. So we'll go through most of these through the course today, but data factory, data engineering is kind of a combination of different things. We'll talk about it in different ways. Data warehouses, we'll talk about OneLake, some of the data science tooling, real bit on real-time intelligence and Power BI. But really what we want to kind of give you a tour of is there's a lot of things you can do within Fabric to manage and govern your environment and make it easier to ultimately deploy data products and analytics workloads and tools that are delivering insights to the organization, but also doing that in a well-managed, well-governed, secure fashion. And so we'll be talking about that throughout the course of this today. So we start with Fabric. Our topics will be again, OneLake. OneLake's really foundational to what is inside of Fabric. As kind of linking in how do we storing that data or linking it in, as we'll talk about a little bit. Also, we'll talk about data factory and pipelines and what that allows for. Talk about real-time intelligence and some of the real-time data capabilities within Fabric alongside the more static data platforms that you may be leveraging. Talk about some of the data science tooling, Power BI, and then throughout this, there's a lot of Copilot enablement within the Fabric workloads as well. So things where you can leverage Copilot and prompt a Copilot to do something within, say, Data Factory or Power BI or a couple other areas, and they're enabling more and more of these all the time, which makes it then even easier to be able to, again, work within Fabric for your data workloads. So we'll showcase the current state of those and understand that is a continuing that space continuing to evolve. So let's start with OneLake. OneLake is really, they will describe this as the OneDrive for data. It's pretty good definition where within OneLake, I can have multiple different types of data stores, all referenceable by all the other things I want to do with the data, the tooling I want to use against the data, whether that's ingestion, whether that's data engineering, wrangling, performing data science efforts where I'm, doing some deeper analysis on that, maybe modifying it in a different way, leveraging Power BI against all of that. So it brings all of those, what would historically have been disparate data stores, under, make it easier to work against all of those. The other nice thing, so with that, you have your OneLake catalog, which provides that central view of, okay, here's all of our data in the organization that we have tied in with this, that's available to be consumed, to be analyzed, to be utilized for different purposes. You also have File Explorer here, which is interesting. That can actually integrate in with Windows File Explorer. So from my PC, I can look and see if I'm allowed privileges to do this. So for those that are managing this environment, I can actually see the data items that exist inside of the workspaces and be able to see those in a folder and then a file-like structure, which shows me that database or that data item inside of there. Like we said, inside of OneLake, you'll start with workspaces, and workspaces are important. Here's where we talk a little bit about the governance and security here. I can have separate workspace for, one team or department or use case away from another, and can secure those so that within that data, only those people within that workspace can do certain things with that data. I can then have a separate workspace where only certain people can work within the data within that area. So it allows for the beginnings of controlling access, controlling who might be able to, particularly for who can modify versus who can view. So you have role-based controls that can be applied at that level. And then within there, you have your data items, which might be, okay, I've got a data warehouse in here alongside a lake house, alongside, a standard just SQL database that I have maybe being mirrored in there or copied. We'll talk about that a little bit. So it allows me to group those into manageable units, not only for organization, but also for security and for governance purposes. One of the nice things you have in here, aside from the workspaces and then those data items underneath, which we'll talk a little more about in a moment, we also have the ability to link in shortcuts. So with shortcuts, I can start bringing in maybe on-premise sources. I can bring in things from other clouds. So I may have data both in Azure and in Amazon. I can have shortcuts into there so that there is a connection at least to that other data source. Whether you replicate that into OneLake or not will depend on performance needs, what you're doing with the data, those kind of things. Those are areas that we certainly can help you out with, making decisions against, but it is a nice another option aside from moving data that I can actually link to that data, shortcuts there, and be able to work against that data, even if it's outside of being stored inside of the Azure instance underneath OneLake. I also can link then data items that might be in workspace B, they can view that, even if they're not allowed access into Workspace B to modify and do other things there. So, and that's something you would control and can make sure again that meets your governance and security concerns. But it allows for work to happen there without again having to replicate that over into Workspace. Allows for a broader view of the data that you have within the organization. Without actually moving everything right away. I mean, kind of move the things into here that are going to be, you're going to need more performant analysis against, querying against, reporting against, things like that than would be available otherwise. So a lot of capabilities there that can be leveraged. As far as storing data in OneLake, there are 5 principal types of data, and these would be kind of broader database structures that are possible there. The first one are event houses. So event houses handle real time. This will be, volumes, things that you're getting on a regular ongoing basis. Typically, the logs of different kinds, be all kinds of readouts from different systems. If we're doing things with digital twinning, we might have data in here like that from IoT sources. So all that would be create an event house inside of my workspace, inside of OneLake. I also can leverage, and this is in preview right now, but they're coming forward with this, is Cosmos DB. So here I can do SQL data, AI data, not as structured of a data source as typically, not so much a tabular data there, that but I might want to have a little more flexibility. Start getting into graph databases, things like that can be stored inside of the data lake as well. SQL databases, if I just have a single SQL database, frequently I do that for kind of operational data, transactional databases that are used on a regular ongoing basis. I'm just taking data in there, and so that could be a data item in there. Also in preview, but it is available. And then you have data warehouses or a lakehouse. One of the biggest differences there is if you need unstructured data, lakehouse had been the way to go. Data warehouses aren't really built for that. Data warehouses are more of your traditional data warehouses where it's SQL-based structured data that inside of there. If I need within that database to have unstructured data and want to be maybe semi-structured, that I go for that lakehouse route. And again, in the same workspace, I can have a warehouse and a lakehouse within there for that team that's allowed access to that workspace to operate. And that, again, can be linked off into other teams' workspaces too, but whoever owns that data should have that in their workspace. So from there, let's talk a little bit about, okay, I've kind of figured out how I want to have things structured. How am I getting that data into Fabric? And this is where the data factory, which has existed in Azure for some time, but has been built into Fabric, and pipelines can be leveraged. So here it doesn't matter if I want to do or transform, you can handle it either way. There are over 170 connectors that are pre-built there for different types of data sources that I set up my connector. I can either manually trigger that, or I can have it set to automatically trigger based on a schedule or some event happening. There can be a couple of different ways to trigger that for it to make that either copy, and I can do a copy job. I can do kind of like the copy, or I can do mirroring inside of there so that I'm constantly updating the two sources. Have again automated pipelines here where I can schedule things. I can have it triggered off of certain events. It's automatically ingesting into my data item inside of OneLake, and making it available for to be able to be worked on. The other thing you'll have in there is data flow Gen 2, which allows for, again, that a different version of that automation and ingestion there. It's built into Fabric. And here's one of the first places where we can start applying Copilot, where there are certain prompts I can make to say, hey, set up a connection to this database on this schedule, and it can do that for you. It'll take care of implementing that for you within Fabric and within using the data factory tooling therein. So very, very powerful. It makes it, again, easier and easier to leverage for just data and some data, but also people that may not be as skilled in those areas. So we talked that there is some real-time intelligence capabilities here. Let's talk about that for a moment. Kind of the foundation for this, again, the storage of this is in the event house, but within Fabric there is a thing called the real-time hub, which allows me to have control over the full range, because real-time data is a little different than kind of your traditional data sources. It allows me to control all those specific tools to be able to ingest real-time data, which would be inside of event stream, store it in event house. Can use the activator to actually act on data. So that might be a notification. It might be triggering some kind of automation that occurs. If we see certain events happening inside of the real-time data, that can be built inside of Fabric and triggered. Have my ability to have a real-time dashboard. Because that data is constantly changing, that dashboard's a little different than perhaps dashboards I built off of traditional data sources. I also have a digital twin builder inside of here. So again, for those IoT workloads where I'm building a digital model of perhaps my machines on my factory floor, or of different pieces of equipment inside of my facility, I can build that digital twin inside of the real-time hub in Microsoft Fabric. It is capable of leveraging the custom query language, very useful for real-time data. And again, all this is the data stored within OneLake, within all of it, alongside all my other data, so that as I'm generating, say, Power BI reports, I can be incorporating real-time data into there alongside my more traditional data sets. So inside of Fabric, we then, aside from the storage and ingestion of that, and maybe along with maybe some data wrangling I want to do, some things that are a little more sophisticated other than the automated kind of core transformations that I'll be doing with the data. I can build notebooks inside of Fabric that work against the same data sets, leveraging all the other tooling. I can run experiments inside of there. I can establish environments for different use cases that I may have, and be able to, again, if I've got this problem I'm trying to solve and I want to run my experiments, I can do my data discovery processing inside of Fabric. I can experiment on that. An operational, product or model, or automated workflow that maybe that gets incorporated into the ingestion process or into the reporting end, or wherever I might be leveraging that. But it allows me to experiment inside of Fabric in a safe way, but it gives me the tools to be able to do that. A couple of the interesting things inside of here, aside from the notebooks and experiments and being able to obviously create models, not only data models, but also machine learning models inside of here. I can use ML Flow inside of here to create models against, like, that's that I have out there for other purposes. There's the data wrangler tool, which can be very useful for handling some of these. I don't have to necessarily build my own custom code to the same degree. There's a lot of things data wrangler can do. The other thing is that you have data agents, which really start getting into starting to leverage a little bit of AI to be able to process and wrangle and handle the data. And I can kind of tell it what I want it to do, and it allow it to manage that for me. Again, making this easier for those that maybe don't have the same skill set, which is kind of the general theme with all of Fabric, is how do we, again, democratize the data state a little bit to allow people to ask questions of it that they'd be able to derive value from, even if they don't necessarily have data science skill set. There's a host of what had historically been the cognitive functions inside of Azure that are available into my notebook and have it run sentiment analysis against data that I may have. If I've got a lot of text data in there, I can have a function that just says, okay, run sentiment analysis against this, and it'll kind of give you, the data set on that then with a readout on sentiment. There's a host of different AI functions that can be called from within the notebooks and then be leveraged from there. They're also, again, here's another place where they've enabled Copilot to be able to, again, just establish prompts and say, hey, I want to be able to do this. Can you help me with this? And it can decide the best way to handle what you're asking, and it will kind of prompt you along for doing that. But that way you don't have to write the code. You can just tell it what you want it to do. Particularly if you Copilot in these cases, frequently you do have to kind of know what you want it to do, but you can just tell it. You don't have to write the code. This is really the biggest benefit for Copilot in data science there, and really data factory to some level too. So, but it's just, again, the whole thing's about making this whole thing easier and allow you to spend time on the more value added activities that are part of this whole process. Power BI deeply incorporated in here too, being a tool to be able to visualize and analyze your data, share it with others. I can embed in other tools like Teams, as you see in this example here, and I'm able to share that throughout the organization. But I can build these inside of data and leverage the data in one lake and have a robust, secure connection there. Again, I can tie in Copilot here to be able to ask questions of the data, and this really is where it really opens that up to the public within your enterprise a little more, because I can have my executives asking questions directly of the data, especially if I've done a good job organizing the data, which is really where the governance is going to come in here, as we'll see in a second. But say, hey, what were the sales for this area over the last 3 years? And it can answer that for you, leveraging the data and understand, as long as I've got a good semantic model built on top of that. So we've talked a little bit about where Copilot fits in Fabric in different places. Again, data factory, particularly with data flows, Gen 2 specifically, and data pipeline. Data science, I can be leveraging Copilot within the notebooks. Data warehousing, there are some capabilities as I'm managing my data warehouse to be able to do that, data warehouse specifically. Power BI, again, creating the reporting, even creating the semantic models. I can leverage Copilot to help with that. SQL databases, and then in the real-time space, I can use Copilot to write KQL queries and to operate with the real-time dashboard, very similar to how I'd be operating with reporting in Power BI. Just the real-time dashboards customized for real-time workloads. So I expect you'll see growth on this screen. That these are the 9 areas right now that they've already built these for, but that's continuing to grow. There's definitely investment here. So you will see this expand over time. Again, being able to leverage that the power of even your voice with Copilot and telling it what you want it to do, dictating to the machine, hey, computer, do Copilot take care of this for me, please, and let it run. So very, very powerful. But as I'm doing that, I want to make sure I have a strong foundation. Again, Copilot, whether it's in Fabric or Copilot in general, where I've maybe exposed some data to be available to ask questions of it within Copilot more broadly. I want to make sure that I've got a strong foundation here. One, I need to have my data organized. I need to have it secured so that I'm not surfacing data to people that shouldn't see it. And I want to make sure that as I am surfacing data, even to people that should be able to see it, that is still tagged and marked as proprietary data so that they don't accidentally share that off as well. So a very, very important piece of building out AI inside of the enterprise. So to solve that, Microsoft Purview is really the best choice. And some of the three most relevant areas for a little bit is using data map and unified catalog. These two work together, and we'll talk about those in just a second. It allows you to map your data environment. You can let it crawl over your different data sources in the enterprise. It doesn't just have to be within data lake. It can be on premise. It can be Azure. It could even be into Amazon. And be able to get a sense of what do I have out there in terms of data? Maybe does this data exist somewhere? And what this does is it pulls the metadata from those data sets. It's not pulling the underlying data itself, but it's pulling the information about what fields are in there, what's the name of the database, name of the tables, that kind of thing. Being able to see that in a unified catalog then, along with being able to see the permissions on there and any controls there and sensitivity labels, what have you. Sensitivity labels then falls into information protection. So the information protection form part of Purview. Purview has a Microsoft 365 side where maybe are putting sensitivity labels on my SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams data, looking for certain types of information sensitive that might be sensitive to the person, sensitive financially, sensitive for health reasons. It can search for HIPAA and all those. But I also may have my own sensitivity labels within the corporation. So anything related to this, code word, this project name, this perhaps enterprise that we're acquiring that not everyone should know about, financial data that, a proprietary to the organization, trade secrets, all those. I can set up data sensitivity labeling inside of there in SharePoint and those tooling, but I also can apply that to my structured data. And so I can use Purview within structured data, particularly within Fabric, and be able to tag certain data sources as more sensitive so that maybe I don't want to expose this financial data to everyone. Only certain people get to see it. So kind of the way that will work is I label it, I then choose what protection policies I want to have on that, any built-in encryption there. I also then can leverage that against my DLP engines, whether I'm using Defender, whether that might be in some of the Microsoft 365 workloads, but they'll also be recognized by within Copilot as well and other cloud apps if I have those tools built up that way, so that to prevent that data from being shared where it shouldn't be. And finally, audit's a very important piece of all this too, to be able to track what is happening inside the environment, who's accessing what, ensuring that you have things set up the way that you want to. So for data mapping and unified catalog, once I've had the data mapping tool run against my environment, I can go into the catalog and search against any of the available metadata there. So let's say I want to search for any of the sales data I might have there. It'll show me, okay, you've got this Power BI data set, you have this report, you have certain things related to sales in blob storage. You'll note here that some of these have sales in the name of the file that's stored there. Some of this might be because there is a label and or it's in a certain folder. So it'll take all that data and be able to show me, okay, where might I have my sales data across all of this. As I leverage tagging, and we'll talk about domains in a little bit, and that this really gets to be even better. And those search results are prioritized when I come into here to search for the type of data that I have out there. So it's a great way to kind of map out my data environment, and then I can start working at how do I want to manage this and make it easier to use, but at the same time as I'm doing that, to make sure that I'm not oversharing and or making it too easy for the wrong people to be able to access this information. So the next part of that then is information protection. And again, the first part of that is knowing your data. So map it, study it, and then along the journey of protecting it, this is where you start putting labeling on different data structures, being able to map that out. I may not put the protection on first until I've gotten my labeling, my automated labeling set up the way that I want. And then once I'm comfortable with that, I can start putting in measures to protect it and prevent data loss by, maybe encrypting that data so that wherever it goes, it remains encrypted. And or preventing other people from accessing it, setting permissions on if you can't view this type of sensitivity label, even though I could view the data source, it will stop you from being able to see that line of data or things like that can be used for those purposes. And then, I want to continually govern this and make sure that I'm, managing this over time while still making this as easy to use as possible. You want to be able to, this is how you can securely say yes to be able to allow people to ask questions of the data, really is having a strong information protection there. So, obviously enabling persistent data protection, so applying sensitivity labels, ensuring that the classification is appropriate for what's in there. But this, again, those data labels travel with the data. So even if I'm just labeling it, I can then see where that data maybe is going, where it's been shared out, and maybe what's happening with that. Then can automate governance here, where as I have that label applied, I can apply protection policies that will automatically enforce certain things, as in, if I'm not within the appropriate security group, I can't access this data. Or if I was in that security group and I no longer am, even though I have some of that data, I can't access it anymore because I'm no longer permissioned to be able to do that, even though nothing has changed in terms of me receiving the data or data moving. It's just I have it on a store. I no longer can see it because my permissions have changed. Could be because I've left the company. Could be that I've changed roles. There could be a host of reasons for that. Allows you to simplify compliance too. So here I can actually have, with the data classification on there, I can have an auditable trail of where data is going, which can be very useful if there are any questions in terms of compliance there. Allows you to collaborate with this data without having to worry so much if you've done a good job of putting in the built-in protections from one end user to the other within your organization and say, hey, I want to show you this database. It will permission them so they can only see what they're permitted to see. You don't have to worry about people accidentally sharing things that will give them visibility that they shouldn't have. And so if you have a strong data protection plan and policy in place and have the protections in there, that'll help prevent that from happening. And then just allows me to centralize all this. I can control all this from within Purview. So there is a Purview hub we'll show you in a moment that's built into Fabric. And so from within there, I can see, all right, where is my data? Where is my sensitive data? What's happening with that? And maybe, recraft your policies or manage your policies from there. As far as DLP, which is kind of that next layer of protection where I can't, get to it, I can't share it outside of just having the the labeling on there, I can establish policies there, and that will stop me from accessing that data or moving that data for certain types of information. So even if I am able to view it myself, this will stop me from moving it around and accidentally putting it somewhere where it shouldn't be. It allows me to scope those to certain Fabric workspaces. So, for example, if I have a workspace for the finance group, I might just put a policy on everything within that finance workspace, and that applies to all the then data items underneath that, so that helps me just protect that more broadly and say, okay, anything finance is working on, we don't necessarily want everyone else to be able to see until the right time. There are going to be regulatory reasons for that, certainly. So I can consider create actionable alerts, notifications. So if there are policy violations, things have happened, I can notify somebody, and you can handle this through either education and or taking action. You can see what actually happened in real time. It also allows users to be notified that, hey, what you're trying to do isn't permitted, and be able to stop them from taking an action. And again, all this again is audited, so it's again important to be reviewing your audit logs with all of this in order to make sure that what you've set up is working over time, and that you don't have other exceptions you need to take care of, and or maybe need to change the policies because we're blocking a lot of stuff that maybe we shouldn't. So it is something that needs to be managed over time. So we talked a little bit about Power Fabric and Purview together and how these can be leveraged, but let's talk about it in kind of more general terms, in terms of, if I'm looking at my data set, what am I really trying to accomplish out of these things? Well, one of the things I want to do between Fabric and Purview is organize and curate my data. This allows it to make it more findable, easier to discover, allows people not have to search so much for where data might be as they're trying to do different kinds of analysis or build certain data products. It allows it to bring it all in one place. So how do I leverage Purview and Fabric to help with that? Also then, as we've been just talking about recently, how do we secure and protect it, right? I've made it discoverable. How do I make sure that it's not too discoverable for the wrong people, that only those people that should be able to access that are able to? So how do I leverage Fabric and Purview together to be able to secure and protect my data? And then, in addition to that, so I've got it discoverable. I've limited what people can see inside of there to the right levels. But then over time, how do I ensure that people have confidence in that data? And this really gets into how am I providing some kind of validation that, yes, this is good data, the company believes in it, this is the best data source to use. And there's some tools inside of Fabric and Purview to help promote that, to track lineage of data and things like that, in order to ensure that people have confidence. They've now be able to find it. They can only see what they should be able to see, and there are limitations on where that can go from there. And I'm promoting confidence in that over time, so that people are confident in that, okay, I found this data and I'm comfortable using it for this purpose. And so you're not spending the cycles questioning that to the same degree. And then finally, the whole purpose of all this is to be able to use the data. Just having the data is one thing, but I want to be able to use it. And so I want to be able to drive insights for that. I want to be able to build applications and data products off of that. I want to be able to leverage that for AI use cases. So all of this is very important to be able to get to that point. So in terms of organizing and curating your data, some things we talked about already, Purview data map and unified catalog. You start there by mapping and catalog your data across multiple clouds and platforms. Gives me kind of a sense, okay, what is my data state actually, right? It's not just what's in this bucket and what's this bucket. It kind of can take a view across many different ways if you set that up the right way, and be able to start bringing that all in and start be able to think about, okay, how should I be managing this a little differently? Way to start managing that is, okay, how am I linking that into one lake, so I can put my trusted data sources and any data source I want to have in there, be able to link in there, whether I'm migrating that data source into there and then eliminating another data structure that I have to manage. I might be copying that in, so that data has to continue to sit where it is, but I'm now copying that into OneLake, mirroring that. So if it happens on a more regular basis, or still like, hey, that's going to sit out there. I don't really want to port all that in, but it would be nice to be able to interact with it at some levels, even if it's not going to be as performant. And that's where I can leverage linking with shortcuts. So once I've kind of mapped out where my data all is everywhere, I can start leveraging OneLake to be able to start consolidating that all together, making it easier for the end users and for those involved with managing the estate to be able to see what and control what's in there. From there, I can set up the concept of domains. So here, across different workspaces and data structures, I can set up what I might have a business domain. So I might have a finance domain, and finance may have multiple workspaces out there, and they might have some other outside data sources there. I can establish a domain across those to say, okay, this is all the finance domain data. And from there, then that can be useful for the next piece when I'm starting to secure or protect this data about, okay, I can start to manage that at a domain level across all those pieces of my data estate. The other thing I can leverage here is tagging. Tagging provides that additional metadata where if the name of a table or a file or a database doesn't necessarily convey where this might be useful from a business sense, I can put tags on data too, so that adds that extra metadata that then is consumed by the data map and into the unified catalog, so that as I'm searching for data, I can see, oh, wait a minute, this is sales related to, even though it says nothing about sales. This allows me to put that sales tag on there. And I can even get far more granular than that this is sales for this division versus that, and be able to differentiate, especially when maybe their underlying sales data looks the same, but they're for different divisions. I can use tagging to be able to differentiate that way. Very, very useful for, again, organizing and starting to curate the data to make it easy to find the data that I want. Now, I've made it easy to find. I have to make sure that haven't made it too easy. And so I need to make sure that I'm securing this the right way. First place to start is if I'm doing things within Fabric, either between the tenant and the workspace, I want to make sure I've got the right rule-based access controls on there to be able to control access into that Fabric environment in the right way and make sure people aren't able to alter that data, make changes to it, extract it, when they shouldn't be able to at a base level. From there, I can start leveraging sensitivity labels. Well, maybe I can access this data, but I want to make sure I'm careful about where that data is going over time. And so I can leverage sensitivity labels to say, okay, here's some data we need to be a little more careful about, which then we can have the protection policies and DLP act against, where if that's starting to be exfiltrated anywhere, that can put a stop at it and be able to track what's happening there. And again, all that will be audited so that I can use the Purview audit to be able to track for any ongoing activity, maybe areas that I hadn't put the protections on in the way that I maybe had wanted to or should have, what have you. But I'm able to see what's happening there, and I can then alter my management course along that. From there, I've organized it, curated it, secured it. How do I now promote confidence in the data? And this is where the concepts of endorsements come in. So here I can endorse the quality of data contained in certain data items. So within, I might say, hey, I've got this data warehouse versus this. I'm doing a bit of a medallion architecture, as some of you may be familiar with. I can actually put an endorsement on there that then is carried through onto Power BI into anywhere where more end users will be working on it. You can have them work against only data that's been endorsed in a certain fashion. Allows to, again, you're promoting trust here and promoting confidence in the data set. You may have more raw data underneath that has been modified, and you keep the raw data there for other purposes. You don't want everyone operating against that. You want everyone operating against that more curated, managed, trusted data. And this is a way to tag that essentially and be able to say, okay, this is the data source you want to work against. Even though you see 3 copies of this, this is the one to use. I also can have lineage tracking inside of here built in, which allows me to see where did this data come from. And so I can see that this data was transformed and extracted from here. It's then put into this structure, and then I pulled these fields out of there and these fields out of here to create this table or this data structure here. It's important because I can see where the data came from, so I understand perhaps more context of what that data might be representing. The other thing I can do that tied in with lineage is what is the impact analysis. So if I am perhaps looking at making modifications to a data structure that might be further up the lineage for another data structure, I can see what's tied to this so that what might those impacts be going downstream? How is that going to impact others when I make this change? And so there's an impact analysis capability built into here too. All of this is visible within the Purview Hub for Fabric. As a kind of quick glimpse of the front page. It's very small, but you'll see that there are sensitivity labels there. There's the endorsements, there's domains, so I can view my data state from different points of view there, be able to see lineage through here. I can see the impact analysis on there and get down into the data item level. So the specific data warehouses and that, and be able to see different data points on there. I can see, how widely used are my sensitivity labels. How have I put on endorsements onto a number of structures, or is that pretty limited right now? Maybe do I need to think about focusing on that? And how much am I using domains across the data state there? So just as some quick examples, there's a lot that can be done inside of this space, but very useful. And again, this is Purview Hub is built into Fabric. It's one of the tabs you'll see inside of Fabric. So finally, I want to be able to use this data. How am I doing that? So, frequently it's going to be Power BI, maybe the Fabric data science tools, maybe some other data science tools, Copilot, but within those Microsoft controlled tool sets tied to Fabric, the work I did to organize and curate my data allows me, with unified catalog, domains, and tags, has made it easier for my end users to find that data, to focus on the higher quality data, and be able to get to work faster. I'm not searching for data, so I haven't made the search process so difficult. I then have also, if I've secured and protected the data with sensitivity labels, protection policies, and DLP, those are respected in these tools. So if I am in a Power BI dashboard, I'm logged in as myself, it matches my identity against what I can see. If I'm only allowed to see North American sales, but global sales are in there, that'll filter that view down to North American sales for me based on my identity, if I have those labels and protection policies set up the right way. I may be scoping that in other ways, which is fine, but this way it ensures me as I'm setting up new ones, I've got that built into the data, so that anytime somebody's viewing the data, that's already pre-built into there, which makes that a little easier, again, to prevent oversharing and data leakage, and to make it easier for people to consume the data in a trusted fashion. Finally, I'm working at promoting confidence in the data. So I found it. I know I can access this. Do I, as the end user, trust the data? Is this data of a high enough quality for me? Is this the latest? Is this data that's been managed in a way that I would expect on the back end, or is this a little too raw for my purposes? Am I interpreting this the right way? That's where endorsements really help with saying this data, this is what you should expect that this is, and then having the lineage and ultimately the impact analysis inside of there too, to help manage that over time, ensure that you maintain trust in the data so that people are actually able to use it, which is the whole point of having it in the first place. So from here, it covered a lot in kind of a tour of Purview and Fabric. A lot of areas you can dive inside of here. happy to help you out with that. This is something we're doing with customers all the time, is navigating this space. So I want to give you kind of a quick tour of how these tools work together today. So happy to work with you on a data environment review, where we'd be happy to identify opportunities to start unifying, managing this in a different way, optimizing your data landscape, securing it perhaps differently, and or taking the next step and saying, okay, how can I leverage Fabric and Purview together to streamline compliance and make sure that I can trust data and being able to trust the process of building out data insights off of this. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your time today. I hope this was useful, and if there's any questions, we'll take them now.
I'm not seeing any questions, so feel free to, oh wait, questions in the Q&A window here. Let's go ahead and look at those.
Yeah, sorry if I wasn't, I'll pull that up myself too. Yeah, so I'm just going to go from the one that I saw first here. So what's an example of an impact? How does impact analysis represent the stakes of the impact? How does it know? I wouldn't say that it would say the stakes, and I think that's, in kind of more the human terms of that. What it can do is say that, hey, this data field is being consumed by these other data structures inside of there, and that if you're making a change to this, it's going to be consumed by this other data structure and or data item out there. And so it would just show you where those potential dependencies are between there. As far as the stakes of that, it doesn't necessarily mean that I make this change that's a bad thing. It's just being aware of where those potential impacts are. That's really what they're meaning by the impact analysis, is how widely used is this data set downstream, and so that gives you a kind of a sense of that. As far as, is there a systematic way to identify what data deserves to be promoted certified master? I don't know that there is perhaps a little bit of art to that, but if we're pursuing a medallion architecture, there is a little bit there that we could leverage. Again, the promoted certified master are the tags that are available for endorsements by Microsoft, and they have certain meanings ascribed to those. And so we can work with you and say, okay, this is that definition of what that meaning is supposed to represent. And that's really what that is. It's a little easier in a medallion architecture there to do that, perhaps a little more systematically. There we could. If I'm kind of building my way to that, that might have a little more of a one-off approach to that, and or a general policy towards, okay, how comfortable are we with endorsing this, as this is one or the other, if I'm endorsing it at all. So any purview functions that innately key off of that. As far as purview functions that innately key off of that, the endorsement really shows up. It's not so much so when it's surfaced inside of purview for sure. I don't know that the protections necessarily get driven off of that. They're more driven off of sensitivity labels and things like that. But it does surface itself. So, for example, in the unified catalog, it would surface those and say, okay, if I've got master data here, I'm going to show that first. It prioritizes it in search results when I'm looking at things that way. And then in Power BI, when I'm looking at different data sources there, if I'm looking at crafting a dashboard or report, I will see it there. I also could, if I'm doing perhaps things with Copilot, I can say, hey, only use master data, or at least endorsed data at some levels. There, I could make some changes there. So yeah, it is kind of tagging those data sources as for a different form of filter, but it does natively show up in the search results. So the search algorithm's designed to be able to promote endorsed data above others. So there are some built-in things there, but not necessarily in the protections. That's more in the kind of usability side and governance side of things there. So you have exported a set of data to Excel or CSV, and those security tags are in place. I have access to revoke later. By what means am I preventing from reading the contents of my exported file? So, great question. So if I have an Excel file and the security tags have been carried forward into that, as if I've set things up the right way, it should if it came from a managed data source, a protected data source. That then I can apply encryption along with the tag. So one, I can just tag it so I know what it is, and then I can use DLP to stop it from going anywhere. But if I've enforced encryption, information protection policies on it, I actually can encrypt that file so that if I can't log into the file, if it can't identify me or it's not a trusted login anymore, that file just becomes an encrypted blob. So I won't be able to get into the file anymore. And that's what those information protection policies do alongside sensitivity labeling. The nice thing with it is sensitivity labels let you identify it first, make sure you get those set up the right way so you're not over enforcing encryption and bringing the business to its knees. So there's it's kind of a nice two-step process there as you go through that. As far as preventing from exporting to Excel compatible formats at all, that will depend on how you're setting up policies. That really becomes more a function of some of the DLP pieces and how you've set the controls within both the tenant and workspaces and things like that. But the nice thing with Excel is it is a managed form inside of using Purview and information protection that I can enforce security labels and then the information protection policies on it. So if Copilot is a decent amount of read-only ability, with what tools can it make agentic action and what can it do? So yeah, I think on that, one of the slides we had here, I'll bring it back up again. This is the current list within Fabric. Obviously, Copilot can query different things, but built into Fabric and into the tooling, here are the specific things I can do inside of there, or specific structures that I can leverage Copilot immediately. Again, some of these, like in notebooks, I can pull up Copilot in the window and it will be operating within the notebook alongside me. Power BI, same way, where I can go and use Copilot and do natural language querying against it with then that understanding that Copilot brings to it. You've had natural language querying in Power BI before. Copilot allows for a different level of intelligence to ascertain what you're asking and what's available to it and be able to discern, okay, this is likely what you're looking for, and here you go. Having good semantic models really helps with that. Very, very important. Yeah, let's see. Is a license required to use the Purview functions in Fabric? So the Purview functions in Fabric are run on a consumption basis for the most part. If I have, say, E5 or that Information Protection Plan 2 in Microsoft 365 world, that lets me tag and set things up and automatically apply security labels in my unstructured data. So my Office files, PDFs, all those things I might have stored in SharePoint and that. Inside of Fabric, it's done there's a consumption model for that, which we can help you kind of understand how those charges would be incurred with that. The little bit of a calculator to that we can help you walk through if you'd like. I also see this. How does Fabric compare to other platforms and products like Databricks, Snowflake with Tableau, and/or Power BI? So if you're not seeing wide scale adoption of Fabric, we're seeing a lot of projects in that space. I think Fabric's been around for the beginnings of it was probably 3.5 years ago. And again, a lot of the underlying structures behind Fabric have been used. So those that had already built these things are just now, some of them are starting to come over and say, okay, I'm going to change this over to more of a Fabric style architecture. I think, over time here, there is some functionality that you could do things more natively within the Azure data services space that have been brought into Fabric over time. So the offerings evolved. The tooling was always there, but they hadn't folded it into Fabric yet. As far as things like Databricks, Snowflake, I would say there's at least with like a Snowflake, there's probably 90% there. I can still leverage Databricks in here. Actually, if you have Snowflake, there are ways to tie that into here at some levels too, although you start to get some redundancies there. But Databricks is something that I can have some ties in there. I think Fabric is building more and more redundancies with what Databricks was offering customers previously. So again, it's kind of an evolving platform. It really depends on what your needs were within Databricks. If you're using the higher end functionality that Databricks and or Snowflake can provide, there may still be things that Fabric can't do there. But they've certainly increased its capabilities dramatically over the last few years. So we are actually we're doing a number of Fabric projects here. But I'm not going to say it's on the full functionality of a Databricks or Snowflake, but for some customers, it's more than enough. And so it kind of depends on what your data needs are there, I guess. We are actually seeing some significant growth in Fabric over the last year, I would say. So for what that's worth. Okay. I think those were the questions that I had. So again, we are happy to talk to you after this too. If anyone wants to reach out, happy to just have a conversation and we can drill through some more of this. But I think we're about at the end of our time here today, and just hope everybody has a great day, and we look forward to talking again in the future. Take care.